It's Thursday, so it's got to be Code Corner time. Hey, Steve, how's it going?
It's going well, AM. How you doing?
And we've got our first ever guest. We've got Anna here with us. Welcome to the show. I'm AM Grabelny, one of your hosts. I am a developer advocate here at AWS for Game Day. Steve, you want to introduce yourself next?
I'm Steve Roberts, developer advocate for .NET and PowerShell.
And Anna, the most important person on the screen today. Please.
I don't know about that.
I do.
I'm Anna Spysz. I am a front-end engineer for AWS.
All right. And so if you are new to the show, this is Code Corner. Welcome. We are here to talk all things coding. We have been on for 3 episodes now. This is our fourth, I believe, number 4. So we've covered all types of different languages. We've covered Python. We've done some C#. We've done some TypeScript now. Today, we're going to be continuing on in TypeScript, but we're here to talk to you all about where you're at in your coding journey too, because we're all at different places in our coding journeys as well. Anna is, Steve is, I'm in a different place than all 3 of them. So we would love... What is that supposed to mean, Steve? Wait a minute. Hold on. Let's unpack that.
Having just spent 7 hours with you on a live stream at the Paris Summit, yeah, you're definitely in a different place to everybody else.
Well, that's true. I definitely can attest to that. Yeah. So yeah, that's generally. Should we talk about the format of the show a little bit, Steve?
I think let's dive in, and I can see hellos coming in already from as far away as Egypt. That's awesome.
Wow.
Welcome.
Cool. See Atlanta. Yeah. By the way, we're live, right? So get those questions in, chat with us, talk to us. You control the show. Basically, what you want to see is determined by what you tell us that you want to see. So please keep those comments coming. But the format, Steve, and for Anna's benefit too, since she's new here, what do we do?
Well, we talk about, as you mentioned earlier on, all things coding, right? So we're going to probably start off with some just general chit chat, what's going on, what we've been up to, etc., etc. But then we're going to have 2 segments in the show. Beginner's Corner, which is for people who really have no coding or very limited coding experience, right? That's perfect. You know nothing. That's great. Welcome, right?
Welcome.
Because, as I've mentioned, I think in previous shows, we've been out at events recently, and we get a lot of people walk up to the booth and say, hey, how do I get started with this coding thing? What is this coding thing, right? And, it made us realize that there's a lot of people out there that maybe don't know how to get started or are looking at the range of languages available to them that they could start coding in. Like, should I anchor on one language or should I learn several languages? We've had that discussion a few times, right? So we're trying to be as much as possible language agnostic on this show. So we've already been through Python briefly. We've done some C#. We're now doing TypeScript. Other languages will be available in the future when we learn them. Maybe even COBOL. I don't know.
Whoa.
There's
no promise if you can't deliver.
There's a promise. I need to find a COBOL compiler first, but I'll have to touch up my old colleagues and see what I can get. We're not focused specifically on one language. It's just generally, what is this coding thing? How do particular languages work? How do different things appear in different languages? The same thing appear in different languages, right? So certain languages will call a particular thing this, and then you come across the same concept in a different language with a different name. And is it the same thing? Does it work the same way? I'm not sure, right? So we're trying to answer those kind of questions. And then in the final segment of the show, we have Project Corner. And that's where we kind of step up to a little bit more advanced. Even if you're brand new, you're in Beginner's Corner, hopefully whatever we present in Project Corner, you will have enough knowledge now to be able to at least read and understand what we're talking about. Today, it's all you, AM, with your Project Corner.
That's right.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing later?
Yeah, for sure. So Beginner's Corner today is all going to be about TypeScript. We're going to be talking interfaces, classes, and generics in TypeScript. We've done a little bit of that in C#. We're going to see how the 2 things compare, how they're different. We haven't talked generics yet either, so we're going to spend the most time about generics, I'd say. And we might even be getting a little demo, I think, from Anna. Anna works for the app composer team here at AWS. Very, very, look, I'm not supposed to pick favorites, Anna. Not, but The reality of it is, it's one of my favorite, if not the favorite, dev tool that I've ever worked with.
I mean, we are a pretty special team, a little bit un-AWS-y.
I love it. And so then in Project Corner, I had this wild idea, I'll call it, inspired by my youth, to start using some generative AI to create, back in the 90s or so, maybe late 80s, there was a collectible card craze. Anna actually reminded me of another one yesterday, the very visual, that can also kind of be generative AI generated. What were we talking about yesterday that kind of falls into the same category as collectible cards?
My vast Pog collection.
Yeah, Pogs. Oh man,
had the catalog and everything.
Pogs were
some sweet slammers.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
oh yeah.
This is all going way over my head. Well, there's nothing new there, really.
If you've never heard of a Pog, never seen a Pog, it's like a little circular piece of cardboard, but it has like some kind of cool image on it, usually like some sort of artwork on it that was
okay.
Like it could be a branded piece of art, like they were like, Star Wars Pogs maybe or something, but generally it was just like some random piece of I'll call it radical art. Like I think that fits with the time period. It was very radical.
Yeah. I mean, it was big in the 90s in the era of like Lisa Frank and all that. And then it just went away. I'm still waiting for a comeback.
Oh,
here's a question. Yeah, I just saw that one.
Danielle.
And I don't know. I had a few, but I like kind of missed that craze and never had any worth any money.
We had a question about App Composer too, real quick.
Oh, yes, Bernard. Not yet. But you can use it alongside in connected mode, which maybe we'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So we've got that to look forward to. We're going to be using some generative AI through, unfortunately, not through the services that just launched today. We had some AI announcements today that were really exciting, but I'm actually using SageMaker Jumpstart in my project corner, which again, if you don't have experience as an ML engineer, which guess what? This guy doesn't, no clue. When I look at this stuff, it kind of wrinkles my brain. But Jumpstart's super easy to work with. It just deploys the model for you. Pre-trained model. And then at the end of the deployment, just gives you an endpoint, which endpoints, I know how to deal with endpoints, right? Just give me a REST API endpoint. I got it. So we'll see how all that works when we get to Project Corner. But Steve, do we want to talk about, I wanted to talk about a little bit our segments on the Paris Summit, because probably a lot of people watching now didn't get to see that coverage because it was in a different time.
Didn't get to see my stress levels rise.
That's what I wanted to talk about.
I do want to talk about that, but there's something I wanted to raise first. Actually, I was looking at the comments coming in as we've been chatting, and somebody, let me see if I can find it now. Somebody said hello, Shahim. I think he says, "Good day. I'm from Bangladesh. How can I start?" Right. Which is like the perfect question, because in previous episodes, you and I have both discussed how we came to where we are now. Right?
Yeah.
But Anna, can we put you on the spot? How did you get started in this particular industry, in this role?
Sure. So much like Am, I had a non-traditional path to coding.
I'm the boring one. Yeah.
We're the best. We're the best kind.
Yes. Yeah. I actually have 2 worthless humanities degrees. Not completely worthless.
No degree is worthless.
No, it's definitely not. That's a lie. But I am not using them directly. Let's put it that way. So I was working as a journalist. I have an English degree and a European history degree, and was working as a journalist for a long time. And I'd always been interested in tech. Was always kind of tech adjacent. Did know some HTML and CSS, like enough to build websites for my band or my friends' bands, or If anybody remembers MySpace enough to,
I was going to ask
out
if this was
my
a
page.
GeoCities, if this was a GeoCities.
I had one of those when I was in high school. Yes. I think that was my first coding.
I had the counter, right?
Oh, yeah,
the guest book.
Definitely. The scrolling marquee had.
Did you have any blinky text?
Oh, I mean, the better question is, did I have non-blinky text? And I think the answer is probably no.
That HTML blink. Ooh, once you discover that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I dabbled, but never professionally. And so working as a tech journalist for a long time, and the whole journalism gig was getting less and less sustainable, especially when I moved out to Portland, where I live now, which is not as bad as Seattle, but not a cheap place to live. So
you're talking Portland West Coast, right? Not Portland East Coast.
Yeah. Yes. The correct Portland. Don't come at me.
Oh dear, that's just alienated a bunch of people.
I know. I'm sorry, Maine.
I mean, most of our viewers are from Portland, Maine. So almost all of them, 90%.
Yeah. Oh man, sorry. So yeah, I about 6 years ago now went to a coding boot camp.
Oh, nice.
And it was a local one out here. Shout out to PDX Code Guild. It was a Python-based boot camp, so that was like my first official language, even though I had dabbled in JavaScript before. And it was a great experience. It was very much a crash course, like 4 months long, full-time, every single day, and got a good foundation in everything from the boot camp, enough to figure out like which parts of the code base I liked, and like whether I preferred which language I preferred of Python and JavaScript, and enough to like just get that first entry into a tech role. So yeah, it was a great experience that I definitely recommend for anybody looking to change careers after, say, going to college for something else, or not even going to college, just getting out of high school and wondering what you're going to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up boot camps for starters, because in the previous episode, people have asked us about, should I go with a boot camp or should I go for like a college course, like a technical college course, that sort of thing that we've kind of batted. I mean, I have a college background, so I've come in a different route to you guys, but also the discussion that we've been having, it seems like in every episode now, like, well, which languages should I choose, right? And our advice has been, choose a dynamic language like JavaScript or Python, or a scripting language, and then try a statically typed language, and just see where you kind of fit on that. This is what I prefer kind of spectrum. Typically, as you go through your career, and we're going to see later on today, right, you don't end up using just one language, right? Sometimes in a project, you use multiple languages, right? Best tool for the job, right? So I'm glad that you brought that up, that, it kind of, the bootcamp gave you that kind of ground level experience in a particular tech stack. And then having some knowledge of some others is like, well, actually, I like this one more than this one. I'm going to kind of go in this direction, because that's quite a common question, especially we've been getting at the expo booths and events, like, should I learn language X, right? It's like, well, I don't personally know that language, or in some cases I do. It's like, well, this is where I started. I come through, COBOL all the way through to C#. But some people like, yeah, I only want to do JavaScript, or I only want to do Python. Is that okay?
Some people feel so passionately about JavaScript that they went and made it run on a server. So, just say it.
That's true.
What kind of monsters would do that?
I know, right? I know. I didn't want to. I wanted to say no spoilers, but this is going to be a spoiler. Out of Python and JavaScript, Anna, which one did you end up liking more?
So, part of this was just based on what I was gravitating towards. And I always liked UIs. I always like visual stuff. I'm a very visual person, and I like the direct interaction with the user and building stuff that the user's, interacting with actively. So that made me naturally gravitate towards the front end, and the front end is, for the most part, JavaScript. So that, when I figured out that's what direction I wanted to go in, and I was looking for that first job out of code school, I definitely gravitated towards roles that were in JavaScript because that's what I wanted to get better at. So yeah, that's the direction I went. And now that has become TypeScript because that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half of my current role.
Yeah, that's where I gravitated towards. It was the UX part of things. It didn't, in my case, I was using statically typed languages, but it was the UX part of building things that people actually interact with, not so much the back end. And equally, I know developers who just love working on back end software, right?
Yeah.
With no UI.
We got a question from chat, which we love questions from chat. So please, as you all, are listening, put your questions in for sure. We want to talk to you about where you're at in your coding journey. We want to help you with any advice that we can give. But I think this is a very interesting question because it's all about, we can talk maybe more deeply about how do you construct a resume, especially if you are new and don't have a lot of experience. You're coming out of a coding boot camp. For me, in my case, I went back and got a secondary bachelor's in CS, but I also didn't have any experience, right? So how do you approach constructing a resume? What's your opinion? Let's start with you, Anna. What do you think?
So in my case in particular, like the boot camp I went to had a capstone project, and I feel this is pretty common. Like you'll do small projects leading up to it, but in the end, most boot camps will have you do one unifying project that ties together everything you've learned. So my capstone project was like a full Python backend with the JavaScript. Vue at the time, actually. That was my first framework was Vue. Nice. Because I think the main reason was because it's much faster to learn in a few weeks than React, which is true. But React is what I use now. But so it was one project that encompassed everything, front end, back end, ran in a container. Honestly, the hardest part of all of it was deploying, which that is a thing that boot camps typically don't teach you, that you run into in the real world, and that's one of the very big limitations of that type of education. So
was that difficult because of the choices you had available of where to deploy it, or was it just the mechanics of deploying it?
I think both. We were encouraged to try to use EC2, which is not that easy to get started with when you're a total beginner. So yeah, there's I feel like there was not quite enough guidance there to be successful. So I think I ended up presenting my capstone from localhost because I can get the deploy to work. But in the end, it didn't matter. Like what mattered was I had one project that showed off all my skills. I would say showcase one project you're most proud of, but also link your GitHub. Let employers see your code, see all your projects. That's what I ended up doing.
Yeah.
How about you, Steve?
I think definitely I would echo that if you're at the beginning of your career. Now, in my case, being somewhat older, I got a number of years in there. So what I tend to do, and I've been doing my resume for a while, but what I tend to do is I will highlight at each employer one or two projects that I'm most proud of, that I was really hands-on in. But I will also briefly summarize other things that I've worked on, but not to any great level of detail. But I think the important thing I believe is don't pad it.
Yeah.
Right. Don't try and pad it and big it up, because if you're in an interview and somebody asks you a question and you've kind of inflated that piece of work, you're kind of a little bit stuck now, right? So less is more, maybe sometimes. But definitely list the things that you're most proud of, right? If you're really up to your elbows in some code and you're really, really proud of it, sometimes even if that code didn't ship, right, it was a project that you worked on, you got experience doing something, right? Get that in there, right? And then, it helps.
Isn't that heartbreaking though when that
It
happens?
is heartbreaking when
Yeah.
things get cancelled, yes. But you know,
Yeah.
it happens, right?
It does. Check out James's experience. This is James seems to have touched a whole lot of languages in his time.
Wow.
Yeah, very
See,
cool.
that goes back to the point we're saying that typically over your developer career,
Yeah.
I don't know if the microphone picked that up, but I'm dog sitting.
Yeah, I heard
the
a
dog
dog.
is literally snoring down below me. You know, over your career, you know, you're not typically going to work in one language, right?
No.
So it's always and I know life as a developer, it is a treadmill, right? You are constantly learning, right?
Yeah.
Things change all the time, right? So anchoring to one particular language may not serve you that well. You know, be open to learning new languages, new concepts.
For sure. And I mean, honestly, the biggest motivator I'd say for me in learning new languages has been changing jobs. Like every time I get a new job, typically there will be at least one or two projects that are not in a language that I'm familiar in, right? Or haven't used extensively, right? And then, well, now I got to go learn this because it's part of my job, right? So that's pretty big motivator, I'd say, because I found for me personally, outside of work, just going and reading books and learning, you know, I'll learn the syntaxes, I'll get some of the ideas about how these languages work, but then I don't actually get the hands-on experience with it. So it just remains theoretical, right? And so
yeah, programming languages are like actual languages you learn as well. If you don't use it, you lose it. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
Josephine has a wonderful question. And this goes back to, I think, you know, not to turn it into a meme or anything, but like, I think I've seen all across the internet, you know, random advice, people like, you got to have all green squares on your GitHub profile or no one's going to hire you. You've got to have like, you know, 200 different repos in your GitHub profile or nobody's going to hire you, that type of thing. Let's dispel that first, right?
Yeah, I disagree completely with that statement. And I disagree with it for two primary reasons. One is not all organizations use GitHub, right? For various reasons. So that means that if you want to do that, then you need to be contributing in your own time to other projects. And not everybody wants to do that, right? I have a life outside of coding or my current job, right? And I jealously guard that time. Right. Yeah. Now, early in my career, that was less so. But then back then in the 90s or so, you know, open source, at least like it is today, wasn't such a big thing. Right. So there wasn't that opportunity to go outside and contribute to community projects. Right. Now, if that's your thing and you just like coding 24/7, then knock yourself out. Right. But for those of us who kind of have a home life as well as a work life and try and keep the two separate, this GitHub Squares thing, it doesn't work. Right.
Well, some teams, like you're saying, you know, all the work you'll be doing is in private, even if you know it's not in GitHub, it's in a different, you know, your work isn't public, or you're not allowed to share it. Sometimes people are under NDAs where they can't talk about projects that they've been working, and that's the majority of what they do, right? So, what about you, Anna? What do you think about portfolios? Maybe we can like tie it back to the question now too. Do you think you need a robust, like, you know, displayed work out there for people to go see to get a job?
I mean, if you can, sure, it doesn't hurt. Yeah, if you can do a few side projects, especially, I mean, this is especially when you're starting out. Like if you've already got a few years working and you're working on a code base you can't show off, you can still talk about it in the interview. That's less important. But if you're brand new, I would say learn in public as much as you can. Share your work on GitHub, since this is usually like passion projects. And if you can deploy, then yeah, like get an app out there, you know, use something something that makes it easy, like Amplify or something, to get it out there. But so it doesn't matter how you do it. It's more important that if you can get it out, and if not, get the code base out to be able to just send it when you send off your resume. So that's definitely more for beginners.
Yeah, but here's an idea that goes back to what AM was saying earlier on about, coming into a new project. Typically when you change jobs, right, and you've got to learn a new language or a new deployment method, whatever it happens to be, right, is you can kind of take what you learn, but then have a side project where you're showing what you're learning. It doesn't have to be the company's code that you're putting into GitHub or open, but oh, hey, I was working on this thing in my job today, vague terms, but I learned this particular technique, and then put that into something, either be a blog post or a GitHub repo or something that not only shows your learning advancement, right, but also helps the community generally. Now there's more information available, so everybody who's following on behind you can use that as a stepping stone.
Yeah. I think another side to this too is it depends on what line of work in the tech field you're looking for, right? Like, because there's, we're mainly talking about engineering roles, and we're not even talking about specific engineering roles. Like a front-end developer probably will have much more visual things to show in something like a portfolio, right? They're building, UI, customer-facing stuff. Whereas somebody who's just primarily back-end, what do you show, right? Like there's no portfolio. It's just like, here's like a repo with some of the code I built, you can go check it out. But that's probably only going to be consumable by other programmers, right? Other engineers. So it won't demo as beautifully as something like a front end application. So I think in terms of portfolio, it depends totally upon the type of job you're getting, right? If you're in like sales engineering or developer advocacy too, it starts changing the types of projects that you should have on your resume or in your portfolio as well. Like especially if you're looking for something like in the developer relations or advocacy field, stuff like what Steve's talking about, having blog posts, talks, showing that you're giving back to a community becomes more important as well. We got lots of questions from chat, which I'm so happy about. We've got one. It is a TypeScript day, so I think we should cover this. It's the classic. It's classic.
Yeah.
It's paralyzing. Yes.
I have to say, very, very heartbroken here. Angular is not even mentioned. Which is
I was actually going to make the joke that whatever one you pick today, don't worry about it because there'll be another one along next week. So
yeah, exactly. It's been like 5 minutes since that question was asked, so there's 3 new ones to choose from
already.
Yeah, exactly.
I can speak to this some. I would say, especially if you're super new, just start with something simple. Vue is very beginner friendly, very user friendly. If you like it, I would go with, like, if you like it and think that's the direction you want your career to go, then definitely learn React. That's still pretty much the industry standard for front end.
Everywhere.
Most teams I know use it. Angular's still around, but if you want to patch a bunch of legacy code, you can learn it. If you want to learn something new and cutting edge, sorry, I am
doing cutting edge Angular.
Okay, I'm sure there is.
I mean, it was called Angular 2 for a while, but like it's way past, it's like 8 or something now. But they rewrote the entirety of the first version of Angular. That's still out there. It's just like, it's all in TypeScript too. It's actually one of the projects that I think TypeScript kind of originated with too. Anyway, I'll get off my Angular fanboy soapbox. I know there's cooler stuff. Vue, Svelte, all these things.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if there's like a particular company you want to work at, see what they use and learn that. That's what I did to get my first job.
Chat's popping off with Vue. They're saying Vue, lots of Vue.js, which I only looked at Vue very briefly, and it kind of reminded me of Angular 1. So I'm just saying. Like, if you like it, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, one other point about the portfolio thing too. If you can't like think of your own projects, I just thought of this. Go look for open source projects that need help. Right, like that's a really great way too to show that you're actively learning and you're engaged in programming. Find some library that you've used that you really like, and if they have open issues, go look if you can contribute. All right, so this is a long question, but back to the resume point. How do we highlight to the hiring team who never ask about the things that you want? Like, I think this question is asking specifically about if the hiring team isn't asking about what you're learning, but like, let's just treat the question like if they're not asking the things that you want them to ask in general. Like, is there a way to get, opportunities to be your own hype person? Yeah. What do you think?
It is a good question. If the hiring team don't ask, that kind of seems a bit weird to me. But I think what I would do is I wouldn't necessarily call out, oh, hey, I learned XYZ. I would kind of just put it subtly into the description. Like, so we were talking about, a project that you're most proud of, right, that you've worked on. Maybe that's something that you had to learn a particular tech stack to deliver, right? So I would work into that description of like, on starting the project, I had to learn this, whatever it happens to be. So you're not spending a lot of time in your resume calling out all the things that you've learned, but you are at least raising the awareness that if people want to look, they can see, oh yeah, he's learning this, this, and this. But I think these days it might just be more a better return on investment, if you like, to highlight the things that you've done in the community space, right? Which again, when I started as a developer, that wasn't available. Right now, it's a whole different ball game, right? You can get stuck into projects if that's your thing and you want to do, and highlight those. And anybody that's able to or should be able to read a resume and read between the lines of like, oh yeah, I can see the learning progression. If they're interested, if they're not interested, I'm not sure if that would set off alarm bells.
I was going to say, I know this is really, really hard to remember, especially when you're brand new to the tech industry and you're hungry and you're looking for any job. You're just out there, you're getting rejection after rejection. I've been there, but you have to remember in an interview, all right, they're interviewing you, but you are interviewing them too.
Yes.
Like, do not forget that dynamic, right? Yes. Don't go work for a place that doesn't gel with you, right? Like, it's not worth the mental duress. Trust me, because I've been through a couple of these, and it ultimately does not work out well for anyone involved. So make sure that you're not really just so desperate that you'll take any job that comes your way. Make sure that you are asking the questions in interviews too that are important to you. Learn about yourself, how you like to work, how you need support, and make sure those questions come across in your interview. And if you get answers that are just dismissive or not aligned to your values, move on. It's not worth your time, I promise.
Actually, there's a great question stroke observation that's just popped up from Benedict in the chat, which is, I'm not sure that we'll get to answer it, but note the thing about certifications, right? Certifications are a great way to indicate you're learning.
Yeah.
Right. And you just have to list I've got these certifications, right? It's kind of implicit, I guess, that you had to learn something to get that certification, right? So you could list those, right? And they can be free ones. They could be paid ones. I guess it doesn't really matter. I don't know. I'm not a hiring manager, but if I see those on somebody's resume, at least I know they took the time to go through that process, either as part of their job or in their own time. And that can lead into some interesting questions about how you found it, right?
I like this from Brian, turning the questions into the answers that you want to give, right? That's a skill that you have to develop too. It's not a natural thing. Anna, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah. No, I was just going to add on to that, in that it also depends on the company and what type of specifically like company size. If you are a person who really just wants to keep learning and learn as many new technologies and be a little bit more cutting edge and wear multiple hats, I would go for a smaller company, a startup or something, because you generally in like those companies, first of all, generally like more curious people who want to learn new things because you're always doing that in that kind of role. So that already might be a better fit for you and it might provide the kind of interview you're looking for in that case. But in that role, you generally have to keep learning and bringing up new ways of doing things. And you usually have the freedom to do that more so compared to working at like a FANG or enterprise.
Yeah. I also started in the startup world too. That's my first, probably 3 jobs were at startups, and they took a risk on me, right? And because I was new, but ultimately I took a risk on them as well.
I was going to say, equally, you took a risk on them, right? So,
yeah.
But it was calculated, right? On both sides.
Yeah.
They calculated that the risk on me was safe enough, and likewise, right? So that's great advice, Anna. I love that advice because that's a great way to get those building blocks to your career too, right? Because you'll experience things that if I've seen people start at very large companies that get into just one segment. I was actually having a conversation with an engineer on an airplane back from Paris. So I got seated next to an engineer, and he was maybe 2 years in. I think he started in an internship program, and then he's an AWS engineer actually, which was funny.
Cool.
Yeah, he was just saying like, I don't feel like I'm getting exposed to as much stuff as I should because I'm on this service team and I'm just like focused on this service, and it's like this really small microcosm. In a startup, you'll never experience that, right? You will be on to the next thing, at least from my experience with startups. So
yeah, like you can go to a startup if you want to learn a whole bunch of different things at once sometimes, and then go to an enterprise if you really want to focus and specialize on one thing and get really good at one thing.
Yeah, that's good advice. Well, cool. That took us to about the 40-minute mark. I think we should probably pause and do a recap intro to people who are just joining us, that type of thing. If you are here for the first time, welcome to Amster and the Brits Code Corner. That's the official title, Anna. We didn't lead off with Amster and the Brit. I'm obviously the Brit. Of
course, yeah. I get the featuring, like I'm on a hip hop record.
That's right, featuring.
Yeah.
Of course you're featured. You're a featured player for sure. Yeah. So I'm Amster, and Steve is the Brit. But here on Code Corner, we talk to you about your coding journey, no matter where you're at, from beginner to more advanced. And we get to hear all kinds of people's backgrounds, all kinds of advice, all kinds of how do I break into the industry? How do I move to my next role? How do I learn something new after 20 years of doing the same thing, right? So we are here to talk to you about all those types of things. We're usually live on Thursdays throughout, I think once a month.
Once a month, yeah,
what we do. If you're new to AWS On Air in general, we have lots of programs here on AWS On Air, so be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're watching us on right now. We'll cover more of those shows near the end if you're curious about those. But for now, I guess we should probably move to Beginner's Corner. What do you think?
I think we should probably dive into some TypeScript, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, one more question.
He's found a question as a beginner. Oh.
Recommending boot camp. Recommending boot camp's really hard. Anna, you recommended your own because you have personal experience with it.
But that was one of the biggest benefits was that was in person. It was a local boot camp. And while there are so many virtual now, especially after COVID, There was something really great about being in person and just having TAs. You can just like look at your screen and ask questions. So I would say if there's a local one and it's affordable, do that first. If not, then yeah, there's a variety online. There's some free ones, freecodecamp.org or com, I forget, but free code camp is one that is really great. And it, as the title says, it's free. So that's if you want to get started without investing money, because you don't know if this is what you want to do, that's a great way to start too.
If you're looking for AWS stuff too, I know Andrew Brown, one of the AWS heroes. You can just Google him, AWS hero Andrew Brown. He does a lot of stuff for free too, camps and AWS and things like that. Do your research though, especially if you're paying a substantial amount of money. Do a lot of research, even if it's a college degree. I would say do a lot of research, because you may not be getting the experience that you're looking for, right? And so outline what you want, and then try and read as much as you can to see if whatever option you pick meets your criteria. Go ahead, Anna. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and see if you can get funding. So yeah, some of those code camps are like crazy expensive, but there's also like organizations like here locally we have, for example, we have a PDX Women in Tech, and that's like a group for women, non-binary folks, and they provide some bootcamp funding. So like there are organizations like that all over. So if you can take advantage of that, or like there's local city funds that are trying to get more locals into the tech area. So yeah, research funding too, not just boot camps.
That's really smart. I did the Kevin Smith method. Kevin Smith, director of Clerks, right? To make the movie Clerks, he just got a credit card and maxed it out. That's what I did for my college, like my CS degree, because I didn't have any money, which I don't recommend doing, because it's a very high interest rate on credit cards, by the way.
Yes, I'm not sure I'd recommend that these days.
But yeah, I worked full time and went to school like when I wasn't working, basically, and paid for it all on a credit card. So that was not the best approach. There's better approaches, like Anna just outlined.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Danielle's got a good recommendation. Yeah. Collab Lab.
Yeah. Danielle, a fellow coworker, ex-coworker of mine, also boot camp grad.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I thought I remembered Danielle going to a boot camp as well. Old colleague of mine, Nikki. I think you all know Nikki. You met Nikki at some point. I know Steve has. I think you have too, Anna. Nikki, she was Klein probably when you met her. Nikki Stone now. Another like boot camp grad that came to AWS and is now at Meta. So boot camps work, clearly.
They do work, yeah.
Yeah. What about the other part? We skipped over. When should you start learning a second language? So if you're brand new, working in Python, like create Ivan.
Yeah, that depends on if you want to say do front end stuff, then probably when you want to do front end stuff, you'll learn JavaScript at some point. So it depends on what you want to do.
It does. And as Steve and I always say, it doesn't hurt to look at two languages at once, especially if they are different enough that you can learn other principles of programming through them. Like we always recommend, Steve puts it, dynamically typed or scripting type language like Python, and then an object-oriented or statically typed language like Java or C#, something like that. It'll give you a different view of approaching programming in a lot of cases.
I think I would augment that advice as well by saying I would do it, if it was me doing it today, I would start thinking about a second language once I'd got the basics of the first one down solid. So I have the concepts, right? So then I take those concepts and my curiosity is then going to be, well, I wonder what this looks like in this type of language or this language specifically, right? I think if you start, let's say you know absolutely nothing about coding, right? And you come straight in and you start work in learning JavaScript and let's say C# or Java, right? To take the two opposite ends of the static and dynamic language spectrum. I think you'll probably encounter a lot of headwinds in trying to understand the different concepts and the different syntaxes and semantics. I think getting one language, the basics down first, and then broadening a little bit is probably the best way to do it. But each individual person is going to differ in when they feel comfortable in doing that. You know, I mean, going back to when I was in college, I think the first year, and I did a very developer-oriented college course degree. I think the first year we spent 6 months, 6 months learning Pascal. This is late 80s, right? And then the next 6 months we took COBOL, right? And then I think the second year we did a full year of C, maybe. So, you know, those are long time scales relatively, right? Would I say I was ready to start learning the next language earlier than the 6 months? Or maybe, you know, curiosity. I already knew Pascal when I started, so I spent most of the first 6 months kind of a little bit bored, but then not so bored, right? So I think it comes down to that, is that when your curiosity starts to peak, about, I think I understand this concept, let's go take a look at what it looks like over here. Yeah. Or, yeah, I'm kind of a bit bored with this language, it's not really working for me, let me go and find something else, right? But maybe not try and do two at the same time, especially when you're a brand new beginner.
Yeah. Could be tough too for brand new people to figure out that they're bored with a language, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't have known. Like, I would have just been like, uh-oh, programming is boring. Like, I wouldn't have known that the language was making it boring.
Right.
But I really like Anna's you know, approach too, is like, try and make it practical as well, right? Like, go pick up another language when it's the only way you can do something, right? Like building a website, you have to use JavaScript. It just is how it works, right?
Yeah. Or if you know for sure, I want to build mobile apps, well, you're probably going to need Swift or Java.
Yeah.
So base it on what you want to do.
Or .NET Maui.
Always got to get that .NET in there somehow. I know I said we're going to Beginner's Corner, and we have to, because I have a huge project to get to in Project Corner. But the questions keep coming in, and I love
great questions.
They are. And yeah, I mean, this is I think foundational.
Yes,
for sure. Especially things like SQL, right? Like understanding how persistence happens in an application, and then learning about the database layer, and then learning like, oh, wait, there's like this special language for some databases that I have to use called SQL, right? Like these steps along your journey are definitely important ones, and I highly recommend. Any thoughts here, Anna or Steve?
Yeah, no developer is an island. I don't care if you think you're a 100x engineer doing all the things. Like, you're going to be interacting with people doing other stuff. So the more you at least understand what they're doing and how what you're doing works with them, the more helpful it is. And also, everybody needs to deploy. Like, you can build the greatest app on localhost, but if you never put it out there, then what's the point? So knowing some cloud stuff, like somebody mentioned, the cloud practitioner certificate is a great foundation, because that's easy enough for beginners to approach. It's meant as a beginner certificate, but gives you those fundamentals of what is the cloud, what are some of these services that people keep talking about.
I mean, sometimes the hardest part is just figuring out like what the names in AWS actually mean, right? Like, what is this thing? Like, it's got this name. What does it do?
Snow what?
Yeah, exactly. I got to give you all bonus points in App Composer, because that's pretty straightforward. Like, it's for composing applications.
Thank you. I'd love to take it, but we didn't actually come up with it.
There you go. All right, so let's get over to Beginner's Corner, shall we?
Yeah, I think so.
Welcome to Beginner's Corner. It looks a lot like where we just were, but
I was going to say it's almost identical.
Yeah, we had that wonderful graphic though. We got to play those graphics.
Well, we do. We have to use the graphics. Yes.
Yeah, Tabitha will be sad if she made those graphics and we don't use them, and they're wonderful. So, all right, we talked last time about C# interfaces and classes. Steve built for us a what was it? Monopoly?
A monopoly.
No, Monopoly.
No, monopoly, I call it. Yes, because I don't want to get sued. But
it's
like
I'm
still working on it. I've not made as much progress over the last few weeks as I would like. Other work has got in the way, etc. But I am still going for it. So at some point, it'll pop up again on Code Corner.
It's like my Ouija board. Definitely not a Ouija board. It's a Ouija. It's different. Covered under parity law, I think. Anyway, so we talked classes, and Steve showed us a very, I'd say, large scale class inheritance model through Anopoly. Is that what you call it? Do you call it
Anopoly? Yeah. It's Anopoly. Yeah,
that's great. And we've also covered a little bit of TypeScript. So we covered like why does TypeScript exist, right? What is JavaScript? Why does it need types? What problem is this solving? We talked about that a few episodes back as well. So if you are interested in that, you can find that in the past somewhere out there. But to recap quickly, right? And maybe Anna, you can help me here too, as a fellow JavaScript enthusiast.
Actually, I should move myself to the bottom of the screen because you two are the experts on this one. I'm a passenger at this point.
Yeah.
I'm going to just ask you questions.
That sounds good. I'll actually do that.
You two should be front and center.
Wonderful.
Literally.
And then also to like demonstrate. Yes, there we go. That's
wow.
Expert
featuring.
Wow. So yes, as a fellow JavaScript enthusiast, right? Working with JavaScript can be very liberating, but also frustrating due to lack of types. Do you have like maybe like a 2-minute explanation of maybe how the lack of a type system in JavaScript has ever bitten you before? I mean, I could definitely come up with some stuff. But
every bug ever in my previous role. No, it's so I actually had this experience this week because we have some legacy code in our code base that was ported over from a JavaScript based application, and it is wild how I've only been working in TypeScript like a year and a half or so. But I'm so used to it that I put up a PR and legit had some places where I just completely forgot to clear out a parameter I was passing but no longer needed because I'm used to TypeScript calling it out for me. And like my coworker called it out in a PR. I'm like, oh my God. I completely missed it because this was in the legacy code we're still using in the JavaScript bit, and it didn't tell me that I no longer needed this param. So yeah, it can save you. It can also bite you if you're if you then go back to JavaScript and think everything you're doing is safe.
That's right. Yeah, I my favorite is the overloaded param. That's just an object, and in JavaScript, it's like guess what keys we want. Guess. Go ahead. Like maybe there's some documentation, maybe there's not, but
it's JavaScript. I assume nothing is safe.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But in TypeScript, usually when you have that overloaded params in a function and it's an object, it's got, unless you set it to any, which we're going to see is a lot of fun in TypeScript. It just basically turns all of TypeScript off, which you shouldn't use that keyword. But typically, a param like that in a function has defined keys then in the object and the type that you need to send. So like, I'll actually have an example of this in some of the code we're going to look at too. So with that covered, right? Why TypeScript? Let's talk about generics mostly. We'll see some classes and some interfaces like Steve talked about in C#, and they act similarly to C# and TypeScript. By the way, we talked about this in previous episode too, Steve. Same guy built C#, built TypeScript.
TypeScript, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of interesting.
And Turbo Pascal back in the day.
Oh,
I did not know that.
There you go. So you might see some similarities between C# and TypeScript for that reason alone. But I wanted to talk generics because it's one of those things as a beginner, you read about it and you go, huh? Like, what is this thing? It's got this like weird symbol, and the symbols are different in different languages, how you indicate something is generic. And usually you don't get a lot of like clear kind of use cases of why you use generics, right? When reading about these in books and things like that, unless the book's really great, which there are a lot of great books out there. But I wanted to start talking about generics with one of the built-in classes in TypeScript itself, because I think it's really illustrative. You can have generics on all types of different types in TypeScript. You know, you can have generic interfaces, classes, functions. We're going to see a lot of generic functions today because personally, that's where I use generics probably the most. I think there's use cases obviously for classes too, but I don't end up using a lot of it. I don't know if Steve, in your experience with C#, you know, generic classes, have you ever used a lot?
Yeah, I've used generic classes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we have an example right here on the screen right now of a generic class, and it's actually a class in TypeScript. So the TypeScript array, which we've covered data structures in the past, and array is just how you store a collection of things that don't have keys, basically, that are ordered by indexes in the array. But if you notice here in TypeScript, it's got this angle bracket syntax. So let me highlight it. If you look, when you construct an array in TypeScript, you can pass in a type alongside of it. This makes the array generic, right? So that at the coding time, when whoever coded the array class in TypeScript wrote it, they didn't know what type you were going to use the array in, right? Because you might have an array of strings, an array of numbers, an array of objects that you created, like through classes, all kinds of stuff, right? So they needed something to make it generic. Wow, there you go. The word is the thing. So this
so really at the end of the day, what we're saying is that, you know, we don't want to write an array that only holds numbers, an array that only holds strings, and then rewrite it again for an array that only holds some kind of custom type. If we can genericize the collection type or the outer type, then we can just write it once, right?
Right.
That's kind of where you're going, right?
Yeah. So, you know, you might have use cases, and JavaScript lets you do this, so TypeScript lets you do this, where you've got sorry, I had to cough there. You've got different types in the same array.
Yeah.
But if we didn't want that, if we wanted to make sure that the array had all the same type, we could go in using generics, right? And look, we're starting to get red squiggles, which
never good.
Bad. It's bad.
Good. Squiggles are never good.
But using the generic constructor for an array, we're setting that array to only allow strings, right? And so it can tell, this is a number, right? Can't put a number in this array. So that's a really easy example, in my opinion, of class generics, right? Of when you would use something as a generic in a class. If you got a container, for example, that you're building, and you need it to be all of one type, but you don't know what type, right? You can use that as a generic.
Yeah, because there you're really using generics as a constraint.
Correct.
Right? More so than writing something once to operate on different types of data, but with the same mechanism, semantics, whatever you want to call it, same operations.
Right.
Yeah.
And where this becomes important too is when you come in and you start trying to do things on the individual items in an array, if we take away this type declaration, right, through the generic, I'm not going to be able to do much here because it doesn't know, right? It doesn't know what type, which numbers and strings don't necessarily share the same properties, the same functions, that type of thing. But if I do set this to a string, then all of a sudden on the array, well, now I can do all the things that I can do to a string because it can tell that this is only going to have strings in it, right? All right.
Yeah. Can you have a union type in a generic?
I wonder. Probably. I would imagine. Now, got to ask you, Anna, since you brought it up, what's a union type? We haven't covered union types yet.
Okay. Sorry to jump ahead.
No, you're not jumping ahead at all.
Yeah. No, union. So a union type is basically how it sounds. Sometimes you need 2 or more types within a certain variable or a class, and you can use it's the basically union operator to declare that and say, okay, this array can have strings or numbers, but if it's anything other than that, I don't want to allow it.
Yeah, like Anna's saying, you can have as many as you need, right? You can.
Yeah.
But at some point, it approaches basically doing. If you have too many, it approaches doing the any type, which.
Actually, can I ask a follow-up question to that? So if you go back to the string or number union type and you uncomment line 9, does that now remove the squiggle?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It do, right? Yeah.
It does. Yes, because now I'm allowing this array to hold numbers and strings. And if you notice, it's got only the methods that exist on both numbers and strings, right? That I can use here.
That's a subset.
Correct. Yeah. Because remember when we had string only, I had a bunch of methods on there and some properties too.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to. There you go. Replace, split, length, 2 lowercase. So strings can do more than the union type of string and number, obviously. So it just whittles it down to what both types can do.
Right. Yeah, because I imagine that some people might anticipate that when you have a union type like that, the operations become a union of the operations on the 2 different types, and it's not. It's a subset. It's the intersection of the type of the operations, right?
Correct. Yeah, because since you can't predictably know, which type you're getting out.
Yeah, could be either or.
Yeah.
Now, I did want to show. I don't know if Anna, you and I talked about this a little bit before the show. Some of the tooling, right? We haven't talked much about the tooling in TypeScript and like getting set up with a new project in TypeScript. It's not as straightforward as using just JavaScript. It's not too hard. But I thought, what do you think, Anna? Should we walk them through?
I feel like this is where beginners really get run into issues because you might not know, like you're used to JavaScript, you might know about like Webpack, and then something like, why does Webpack not understand what I'm telling it? So there's like, if you've worked on projects with like ESLint, there's also TypeScript versions of that. A lot of libraries you have to import the types as well. So I feel like there's so many gotchas if you're coming straight from JavaScript and used to only, so for example, for unit testing, if you're using Jest, you try to just test a TypeScript app, it's going to fail over on you and going to ask for your TS config. There's a library called TS-Jest that you need to import. So gotchas like that you might not know right away.
Yeah. We'll be able to cover all of those obviously today, but I thought it'd be interesting just to show like, how do I get started in like a net new TypeScript, folder. So I just did that. I created a directory. I like to organize in this dev folder that I have. And then also I name it by language. And then I have my projects. This is just my own, insanity. But the first tool that I'll say most everybody is going to be using no matter what is NPM, or I guess Yarn also people use
Yep.
Yarn, which is
Yep.
another package manager for JavaScript. But you'll generally run something like npm init. I'm doing the -y, which just means like, yeah, sure, I'm cool with all the stuff that you're about to. Like usually it'll ask you, what version, what testing suite, what license, etc. But I just said yes to everything. Now the next tool that's specific to TypeScript, and you can actually install it with npm
Global.
is TypeScript, right? Which I've already got it installed, and watching npm pull down packages is not exciting. One thing though,
it's
to
like
call
half
out,
my day every day though. So
yeah, I know, me too.
Dev
One
life.
thing to call out, if you do npm I, that's install -g, that installs it globally and makes it accessible throughout all of your basically your computer, instead of installing it in this particular package or this particular directory. The other thing to call out though that I was going to say is, when you use TypeScript, you use a command called tsc. If you try to npm install tsc because you think, oh, that must be the name of the package, you get an error and it says this isn't the TypeScript package you're looking for. So make sure you install TypeScript. There's a lot of documentation out there about how to install TypeScript.
Tribal knowledge, as Brian said.
Yeah. But tsc is the command. This is the actual compiler, they call it, which I guess technically is like what? Transpiling.
It's a transpiler. It's not really a compiler, but I'm not going to argue with the creator of it.
This is like it's one of those nerd battles you can get into. We're just going to run tsc init, which is like the npm init, because tsc, the tool itself, needs a configuration file, and it's going to generate that for us. So it generated this tsconfig. Now, first time I started using TypeScript, and even to this day, I don't know what all of these options are. Like reading them, I'm just like,
Sure.
Okay, cool. So oftentimes I try and search for like a starter kit, like on GitHub, like, to see. And then when I start getting more close to production, I start reading the explicit definitions of all of these things and making sure my tsconfig file is all good. Really, like Target is probably one of the most important.
Right, I was going to say that raises the question I was going to ask Anna, like, is it important to know what this stuff means when you're getting started?
So I would say my philosophy of tsconfig in particular is not so much learn by doing, but learn by error. And when something goes wrong, and then you go on Stack Overflow and Google the error, and it says, oh, your module needs to be set to something else, or you need to add this to explicit imports or whatever. So I don't know if that's the best approach. That's been my approach, though, in learning this stuff. And then you start to recognize, like, oh, this is failing because the target is wrong.
And a lot of times this stuff exists because of history, right? Because of the history of JavaScript. JavaScript famously was written in 10 days, they claim. Brendan Eich, wrote it for Netscape Navigator. And then Internet Explorer came in and started implementing JavaScript and added Ajax. And so over the years, JavaScript has changed the engine that it runs on in the browser specifically. For a long time, JavaScript only ran in a browser. So as things changed, right, they had different standards, right? ES, which is ECMAScript, which is even getting into the super weeds of
That's the
JavaScript
standardized version of JavaScript, right?
Correct. Yeah. So certain browsers would support certain features of ECMAScript where others didn't. So this target thing really is all about like, what browser am I trying to target, and what version of that browser am I trying to target?
Yeah. And that's very much based on what do you need to support for the thing you're building. Do you need to support IE 11? You might need a different target. Yeah, good luck. Yeah. Or are you okay with just supporting the most modern browsers and that? Yeah, so it's very use case specific.
So I guess I would summarize that then is that ES thing is like a playing field level of like, it's this like compatibility level of if I target this, all browsers that say that they support that standard level, this code will run, right?
Yeah. Look at the tooltip for this. Set the JavaScript language version, basically. That's pretty descriptive, I think. And generally speaking, this is more important for, again, generally speaking, more important for the browser than it is for Node.js typically.
Yes.
So if you're running JavaScript on a browser, it's not as, the target becomes still important, but not like which browser am I going to support, obviously. So anyway, when you generate one, it puts all the lines in here commented out, so you can come in and they have descriptions of each thing, some light reading for you.
Yeah.
But we'll mostly just move past that. I like Anna's philosophy. Just keep working at it till it breaks and then try and figure out why it broke. I love that. So I thought to showcase like a real usage of generics, I would build a little HTTP client that parses some JSON, because this was something that I actually just built like a few weeks ago, and Anna was also dealing with this too. So I thought that was kind of funny. It was a coincidence. Yeah. So shall we take a look? I guess I'll outline first what I'm trying to do. So I want to take this path to the GitHub API, and I want to use this path, make a GET HTTP request to it, and get the information coming back. So I'm going to start out the easiest way I know how to do that, without any parsing, without any JSON coercion. I'm just going to get like the response itself, right? And then we don't know what type it is. We don't know what fields are going to be on it. So we can't really use TypeScript very much here, because I'm just going to build, and I've already built this, a generic, or not generic, a non-type aware version of this HTTP request. All right. So I'll put this code up later on our GitHub repo, so you all don't have to worry about fully understanding what everything is here. I'm using Node 18, which uses fetch now, which Anna keeps telling me to stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
But they made it happen.
They did.
It's fine. Somebody finally made fetch happen. That's the important part.
Yeah. It's a little Mean Girls shout out. Little reference there. Basically, all of this boilerplate is doing is making a call and then checking if there's an error. So this first version doesn't know anything about the type. It just returns promise. We could like maybe define a type out for the status code, which, spoilers, I did, but it still doesn't know anything about that body that's going to come back. And so we're going to look first off at what it looks like. I'm going to use npx, which lets me use libraries without downloading them through npm-i-g. Like I can just, and I'm using this library tsnode that it'll make a script run without me having to run all the compiler and stuff. It'll put these files in a temporary folder somewhere for me.
Oh, so you don't need to
run,
you don't need to run TSC with this. You just run npx directly on the TS files. Nice.
Yeah. That's one of those super useful libraries you start using a lot and when you're using TypeScript.
Yeah. Because you lose the ability of doing this.
Yeah.
You can't do this anymore. That doesn't exist.
Oh, okay.
So let's do, I blew away my command. So call GitHub. All right. And we're going to see the response that comes back is just going to be, well, I didn't save the file. Hold on. So we got spoilers there, but the response that comes back is an object that has a status code, headers. It's got a body on it, and then this body is just JSON. So I've got to actually like parse this JSON if I want to do something with it, right? Okay, so now I know I need to take this body field and I need to parse it, but what do I parse it to, right? Again, I could use that anything, but what if I actually want to return a type? Like, what if I want to like look at this JSON and start pulling fields out from it? What do I do? What do you all think? What do you think I should do? Spoilers. There's code over here that'll tell you what I did.
Well, I think
I'm
you
simulating the HTML blink here.
Well, I think we should definitely parse that JSON.
Yeah, totally. So maybe we write a parse response function. Luckily I did. Okay, cool.
That's
so
fortunate.
JSON.parsing that response body. And then I'm just, this is, if there's a data, some APIs send back like data and then the body, some don't. Just depends on what you're using. And then I need the type, right? I need the type still. So where am I going to get that type? Well, generics, all right? So as you can see, I've made this function generic. So I can pass in the type when I am trying to get the response, right? So let's look at what it looks like when I now use request with parsing. So I'm doing just JSON.parse. I'm not changing any of the fields on the body that comes back. So I'm going to have to match the type that I create exactly to the fields that are in the JSON that comes back, right? So this is the JSON that comes back. And you can see there are like a bunch of underscores in here, which not very JavaScript-y, is it? More Pythonic. Anyway, so I didn't capture every single field. I just took one of the first underscore ones and I made an interface. All right. So an interface is like a contract. A type has to fulfill this contract to be of this type, right? So I'm going to now take that generic request with parsing function that I built. I'm going to put the type in, which is this response user. And I'm going to get, I can even see already in TypeScript, before I even make the call, before I even run anything, I've now got a type coming back, right? So I get IntelliSense on it. So should we see if it works?
Cool. Yeah.
Pretty solid.
You want to comment out your original response, your original request first?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Let's see what happens. All right, there we go. So now I've got fields.
That doesn't look quite so exciting.
It's incredibly exciting, Steve. Very exciting.
Yeah.
But this is kind of annoying, right? This is a little annoying. I'm not happy that I've got to write underscores in here because it doesn't really look like JavaScript to me. Do you agree, Anna? Is this something that would bother you?
Is this the hill you're gonna die on today?
I've died on a lot of hills. So no.
I agree. I would prefer the camel case.
All right. Okay. You would prefer it, but you wouldn't die on the hill.
No, I would not.
Would you roll down the hill?
Yeah, or slide with cardboard.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed Brian. Brian got our Gretchen Wieners.
Gretchen?
Nice.
Gretchen Wieners. And none for you, Gretchen Wieners. Yeah, that's a Mean Girls reference, Steve. I
just love all your cultural references. They go.
You watch Mean Girls every year. Don't even act like you don't. You're such a Regina George, Steve.
Hey, look,
I didn't
watch Office Space until about 4 years ago for the first time. So
wow. Yeah. Hey, at least you watched it. Better than later than never.
And now I watch it every year, or if not every month, if I can work it in.
So I did a quick and dirty parsing translation to get it to look more like what I want. right? So in this models file, right, I made a user model, and it's got the node ID, right? Camel case, more JavaScript phonic. Trying to make the Pythonic. Yeah. Anyway. And then I've got a function here that'll parse it and do the translation, basically. Give me the response user, turn it into a regular user. There's lots of ways to do this. This is just the way that I chose to. And then I wanted to write a function to handle it all for me, right? To do the request, to parse it all out. And so I've got double generics now, because you can have more than one generic in a generic function, class, interface, whatever. So this is really time to start bending the brain. We've got T and R.
Okay.
And I did this equals to any part. One, because I needed to, and two, to show that you could actually set generics to a specific type. So I could do string. I could say this process request is only going to work for response users, which kind of takes away the genericness of it. Actually, doesn't really make sense.
Well, no, I'm not sure I'd necessarily agree with the takes away bit. I mean, if you're using interfaces, right, as the contract of what the type has to implement, then doing a constraint on the type doesn't mean that the entirety of the type has to be that particular interface, right? It could be an amalgamation of several. It could have extra data. Doesn't matter. But as long as it satisfies the basic contract that's in the constraint, then you're good to go.
Okay.
Right. That's how I would do it from C#. If I wanted to write a generic function or generic method, that takes a generic type, but I want to ensure that that type that comes in has at least these members. Right, then I would use a constraint clause that says, hey, it has to implement this interface or has to be derived from this type. Right.
Okay, that makes sense. If I made it this
further derived type.
I would say making it equal to this response user, like I was talking about, doesn't make sense. It just would be like kind of defeating the
right. That would be self-defeating in this particular case, right?
Yeah. If you notice too, I'm setting as a function argument another function too, to take the parser, right? So I can build whatever parser I need for each type that I'm going to coerce into another type and pass that in to this function that's just going to process everything for me. So ultimately, it's going to return a promise of the type that I want it to be, right?
What's a promise?
On
behalf of all new beginners.
Yes, that's a good beginner question.
You want to take it, Anna?
Oh, man. Let's see how to explain. I mean, it is a bit what it sounds like. You are promising to return something. You might not know what that is, and it might not, you don't actually get the thing until the promise is resolved. And this is definitely, I feel like, one of the trickiest concepts of JavaScript, TypeScript, along with like this.
This keyword.
This keyword. Oof. Yeah, like those two, if you're a beginner and you don't get it, you can be years in and it still like takes a while to get. So don't stress about not getting it as
so is it like related to asynchronous coding, like where I'm going to call something and I'm not going to get an immediate response back with what I expect, but at some point that data is going to come back. Is that like a promise?
Correct. Yeah. Promises, they have they're objects themselves, and they have properties on them and methods on them. Back in the day, I remember with JavaScript, it was a lot of fun. You would have to chain, before the async await keyword, you would have to chain these promises using a .then function and pass a callback. And then inside that callback, you would handle the response that you get from that promise. It was nuts. It's much easier to work with now with the async await keywords, but it is basically handling things like, how do I, when I'm writing code that looks synchronous, but I'm doing something like calling out over a network that is an asynchronous task, how do I like handle this construct in the language to make it so that I need to do something with the response that's coming back, but I need to indicate to the actual language, wait, like stop here, right? Stop here. Don't move on to the next line until you get a response.
Okay, so going back to like the C# that we showed in the previous one, this would be a task, a promise.
Yes.
This goes back to what we were saying earlier on, that the same concept is just expressed by different names in different languages, right? In C#, this would be a task, wrapping the response that ultimately will come back at some point. This is just a promise that ultimately will come back at some point with what I want, right?
Yeah. If you notice, the promise itself is generic. It's an interface.
Yeah.
It's generic. And I'm telling it what type I expect, which is generic also. This is like the inception of generics right here.
What a tangled web we weave.
But let's see this working, right? So now I built this function, right? I've got this signature. I made it generic with 2 different types. Basically, I want to take that response user, but I don't want that, right, in my function code or in my code that I'm working with after the response. I want a user type so that I can get that nice node ID translated.
Okay.
And as you can see, again, the actual like dev tools.
Yeah, you have no squiggles.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
See?
And the beauty is, so come back to the promise, you're using that await keyboard or keyword right there.
If I get rid of that, guess what I get?
Yeah.
The type returned is
because you'll have a non-resolved promise as the return rather than the results of that promise.
Oh, so it's highlighting the squiggly here then, because parsed user is of type promise at this point.
Right.
Not
and you can see,
right?
I told you it's got a bunch of properties. It's got .then, right? We were talking about then, which is a lot of fun to work with. Catch is like how you handle errors that come back in promise. You can do like arrays of promise responses and then do promise.all.
It's wild. Fun. It's wild.
Yeah, it's next level JavaScript.
It was fun working with those. If you notice too, I've got kind of an old school construct here. I don't know if you've used these before, Anna. You probably have. An iffy. Have you ever heard iffy?
I don't know if I have actually.
IFFE. This was like old school browser stuff. Immediately invoked function expression is what I had to look it up. I didn't know what it stood for.
I was reading that as if IE, since I'm a veteran of the browser wars.
Iffy. So this is like how you used to have to defend against like global scope and all kinds of stuff, like back in earlier browser funness. Anyway, so I'm using this because I want this async keyword there, and this is like one of the easier ways to do it. Anyway,
all right.
But that async matches that await. We'll run this and see the exact same output. Now
so we've remapped that field.
That's right. So exact same thing. Nice. You might be wondering, like, what? Why is this worth it? Like, come on. And why this is worth it, I'll tell you. When you're building things like libraries that other people are going to consume, right? Especially in the like an SDK, for example. This is actually pretty defensive against the SDK and the API. Now, you control the type that your consumers of your SDK will now interact with, and it won't matter. So when fields change in the API, you can go change those fields in your parser, for example, instead of having to break people's code downstream, right? So
there's an argument to be made there for not changing the API to break downstream code. But
good luck, Steve.
Ideally,
it's called API versioning, right? We've done it for a good number of years. But yes, I see your point.
Good luck making that happen. But yes, every API I ever worked with definitely doesn't change things without telling you. Absolutely, never happened to me.
Unless it's an AWS API.
Well, that's true. Anyway, so when you're writing software that is going to be consumed by other people, doing things like this, making generics, using like these higher order pieces of a language, they become more important because it helps you create a more unified interface for the consumers of your libraries. Anyway.
Yeah, it's all about, I mean, the beauty of TypeScript is just it lets you know what to expect.
Yeah.
And if your users know what to expect, it's easier for them to then write code based on what they expect to receive.
Agreed. Awesome. Cool. So are we ready for Project Corner?
Yeah.
Okay. It's still me.
It's still you. Yeah. We're just drifting along here.
Yeah.
I know.
AM's Project Corner.
Anna, before we leave Beginner's Corner, did you want to do App Composer real quick?
Well, I will if you give me a template to show off. I know you guys did a few projects in previous episodes.
We did. We had our backmasking project, which is one of my favorite things ever because I get to make evil sounding messages. I won't tell like what evil specifically, but it basically takes audio and reverses the audio. So that's an audio technique called backmasking.
Hidden messages on vinyl LPs back in the day, if you're of a certain age range.
But Anna, I hand wrote lovingly, crafted artisanally this cloud formation template here. But you're telling me that I don't have to do that.
No, you don't have to do that. In
so
fact, I'm shocked that you did do that when there are other
when I know you and I know
I
know.
So App Composer, this is the project I work on. It's a AWS service, and I am going to create a new project in unconnected mode, and I am going to paste in this template from, I believe it was Steve's version in .NET. This is just
Steve's version, of course.
Well, it's a little, I think it got more advanced. Maybe that's why. But so this is a serverless template, and I believe you just used CloudFormation, right? Or was it Sam?
It was Sam.
It was Sam.
Sam. Okay, so serverless application model. It is infrastructure as code, or a way to describe the infrastructure you want to use for your application in a way that lets you, for example, check it into a Git repo so other people can then work off of it, deploy it, and so on. It's just a way to standardize infrastructure.
So what this is avoiding is basically somebody having to go to the console and click around creating all the resources, and then the next person that comes along having to do it in the exact same order with the exact same settings. It's all just codified in here, and we just share it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's just, especially if you're working on a team with multiple developers or you have a whole DevOps team, then this is a much easier way to work and a much safer way to work. Because if a change goes out and it breaks the deploy, you can see, oh, this is what we changed. Let's roll it back.
Yeah, it's quite nice because these, of course, you can code review as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You can't review. You can't code review ClickOps unless somebody's standing over your shoulder.
That's not the best practice.
That's not the best practice, no.
Yeah. So this is a template, but especially for beginners, you're like, cool, what does this mean? This is just a bunch of JSON. So our tool lets you take a template and visualize it. So now we know, okay, this is a pretty simple application. It just has a Lambda function with some settings such as name. We can go over here and see that it's using .NET 6 as the language.
Unfortunately. Just kidding.
And check it out. So it has this layer here.
Oh, nice.
And it's this layer specifically. We don't have the code of the layer. This is just in your local folder, you would have the code of that layer. This is just showing like, hey, when you go on and deploy this to CloudFormation, make sure to grab this layer as well in its code.
Yeah, for the benefit of anybody who's joined in that didn't see those earlier episodes, what we're doing here is the Lambda function is making use of FFmpeg to actually do the audio processing, right? But rather than including the FFmpeg binaries in the zip file that we upload with the Lambda function, we put it into a separate layer, and then we can reuse that layer across different functions. So,
yeah. And so, okay, what if we wanted to add an API endpoint to this application? Because we know AM loves his API endpoints. So you could go back in the template, look through here, copy paste some examples, hope you got it right. Or, and yeah, the trial and error way of that. First of all, it takes a lot longer because you don't know, especially if you're a beginner to infrastructure as code, you might not know what you need. And then to test it out, you have to deploy, and that's a whole cycle that takes a while. Or you can come into App Composer, drag and drop over here, name your API. Save that. Keep a get route and connect it to the function. And now check it out. This is exactly what we added. So we have the API as the type. We have the properties. We have the path as get. We can actually change the path if we want. And then this is the actual integration with the function.
Oh, nice.
So you get a lot of, you get to see what is going on in the background in the template, and these properties are now in your template, and you can now deploy it, but you don't have to know all that up front. So
what's even better too is I didn't have to start with anything. I did have this template already because I decided to punish myself and write CloudFormation by hand.
Yeah.
But I could have just started in App Composer.
Oh, absolutely. You could take this, delete it, and start over, write your function. So you'll still need to write the function code.
Right.
Yeah. So
this is
you'll
making
have
me
to
really upset because like you did this in 2 seconds. You deleted my work that took probably like 3 hours of Googling. And okay, I'm sad.
Well, I deleted your work when I started too, so that's
wow, rude. Rude.
Doubly rude.
Etienne, how dare you?
But actually, I see another use for this. But you know, if you go onto GitHub, you'll see lots of CloudFormation templates out there. Or if you're in like, if you do some of our workshops, right, they usually give you a CloudFormation template to spin up the resources you're going to use in the workshop, right? That I feel a pretty cool idea to be able to import that into this and get that visual representation of what exactly are we working with here, right? As opposed to trying to scan, hundreds of lines of YAML or JSON in a template.
Yeah, exactly. If you take something more complicated, I'll just do reload this and do a demo app that is built in. So this is just the demo that you can actually then save locally, write the function code. This is a super simple CRUD API. So if I wanted to just quickly see the relationship between, say, API paths and what functions are doing, which ones are connected to our table, which means they have permissions to read and write from this table, stuff like that. Like it just lets you quickly see an overview of what's going on in your application.
It's amazing. Yeah. Every time I see it, again, I'm just like, yep, this is why it's my favorite. I mean, one of my favorites.
Yeah, we're not allowed to have favorites.
We're not supposed to have favorites, no.
Yeah.
Awesome. This is amazing, Anna. And this is just, in the console, right? Like I just go open up AWS and it's right there.
One of the services right there.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
cool.
I like how you have it favorited.
Oh, yeah.
Not that you're biased or anything.
But you can't have favorites. That's right.
No, that's true. Project Corner time?
I think we
Yes.
should.
All right, let's see. Let's see what we can get through. And welcome to Project Corner. Looks a lot like Beginner's Corner and also the opening of the show.
Yeah.
If you're just joining us,
is good.
If you're just joining us, this is Code Corner with Amster and the Brit, featuring Anna today as well. It's been a jam-packed episode, and we still got a lot to get through. So we talk all things coding, wherever you're at on your coding journey. We spend the first half of the show or so talking to you about where you're at, the advice you need, how to get you further along in your path. Then we moved to Beginner's Corner, where we just covered mostly generics. We saw a little bit of interfaces and classes as well in TypeScript. And then today in our Project Corner, we're going to be building out more on our collectible cards API. So as we mentioned up top, and Anna brought even so much more flavor than the collectible cards with the pogs. Oh man, the pogs.
Yeah, I'm going to do a spin-off of your project with pogs after this.
Pogs only. I love it. Yes. Oops, all pogs. Coming up with names for you. Anyway, I kicked things off in our last episode by, and Anna, cover your ears. I'm really sorry. I'm using ECS, but it's Fargate. It's Fargate. So
yeah,
Anna's big serverless dev. Yeah. So I knew if I had done anything but ECS Fargate, she would leave the show. So we had already done a serverless project prior, Anna. I'm explaining myself to you now. And I wanted to show ECS with containers, specifically Fargate, and what it's like deploying like a full API framework type project onto something like ECS. So we started out with, I'll do a quick rundown of what we already had, and then I'll talk about what I added this week. So we started with the CDK, or Cloud Development Kit. And the CDK, which you may or may not know, is more infrastructure as code. But it uses it
from code.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It uses idiomatic programming languages like JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Java, C#, and it will generate the infrastructure as code templates for you.
Which is what we just looked at, right? At the end of Beginner's Corner. We just saw one of those templates in YAML, I think it was.
Yeah.
Right? So
So fun fact, you can take the output from CDK because that's
synth.
just CloudFormation. Yeah, CDK synth, and paste it into App Composer and visualize your resources.
I was thinking about that this morning. That's what led me down the idea of, you could use this as a teaching vehicle of here's what's been spun up in all these templates. Yeah.
Onboarding a new team member. That's a great use case. Yeah.
I'll highlight two features of CDK that I really, really love. Just quickly, we won't do a full CDK in-depth review. There's tons of documentation out there. One thing is these higher level constructs. So application load balanced Fargate service is exactly what it sounds like. I don't have to set up the load balancer. I don't have to set up the full Fargate service. I can just give it some information, and then it, using best practices, will set up all of that stuff for me. Yeah. Instead of me having to individually write out some of these things, which we're going to see how much more code it is, because in the updates that I've made, actually, I had to drop away from the higher level construct.
We should probably point out at this point, because we've just gone through a discussion about promises, right? And making API calls that eventually resolve. Nice cat. Thankfully, the dog has left the room, so we're not going to have a fight. But in this case, you're not seeing promises here because this isn't making any API calls to create those resources. What it's actually doing is creating the resources definitions in a template that will then subsequently deploy, right? So if you're looking at this right now and thinking, where are they making API calls? We're not doing that. right?
No.
Yeah.
No. This still uses CloudFormation.
Mhm.
So it will submit the template to CloudFormation. You made me forget the second thing I wanted to highlight,
I'm
Steve.
sorry.
That's okay. Oh, I remember it now. One of my favorite things about, and this is true for serverless applications as well, using the CDK, you can actually define assets within your own directories, and it will build the actual artifacts that
This is really cool.
So for ECS, obviously, we're going to need a container image, right?
Yeah.
And you can supply a container image from ECR, from Docker Hub, whatever. But I'm supplying it from a Docker file in my local directory, right?
So all you're doing is pointing at the folder that contains the Docker file, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll show you. And
passing environment variables as well. Very handy.
Nice.
Yeah, totally. But I've just got this Docker file, and it will build it using Docker for me, and then
Awesome.
upload the Docker or the container image rather, and then have that available for when ECS starts up the service. So that's it. Just quick rundown of what I'm using. I actually am using a framework called Koa, which is it's newer than something like Express in Node.js. Express is probably the most well-known web framework in Node.js. I read about Koa and was like, I want to try this out. It's newer than Express. It's got a lot of the same types of features as Express, but it's more Express has more packages included with it. Koa has less packages that you then go out and download and like pick what you need instead of having it all bundled together in Express. So something to consider. As you can see, I'm pulling down like a JSON parser, and this is separate. Whereas like in Express, I believe the JSON parser is already in Express, so you don't have to go out and get it. But it works very similarly with middleware. So as a request comes in to the server, it will go through all the middleware that you declare, right? Both packages, like we're seeing JSON and body parser, and also, so I built this little logging. It's not a robust logging middleware, but it gets the job done. And then you declare the app to use these as requests come in. They'll all go through that middleware and get whatever you define out. You also declare out your routes, or how would you say it, Steve?
I would say routes these days.
Routes?
It avoids confusion.
routes, whatever you care to use. And this is like, basically your API endpoints. So if we come in here, I just did a hello world, or a health check rather, but there is a hello world path here too on the. So
I am sorry, I'm going to interrupt you very briefly. Brian's just popped a question in about are these sessions recorded and posted? Yes, they are, Brian.
Yes.
I'm going to pop it up on screen.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. Basically, whatever platform you're watching right now, as soon as the stream ends, it will become a video on demand. So you can start over from the beginning, or if you're looking for other ones, they'll be listed in usually the videos tab for both LinkedIn and Twitch if you're watching.
Yeah, it looks like he's on LinkedIn. So yeah, LinkedIn Live, the AWS On Air, AWS Events channel. You'll find them in there.
Yeah. Cool. So to build a collectible card, you need a description of the card and you need an image, right? I have an English degree like Anna, so I could probably write a card description, but why? Why would I, right? When we have computers that will write it for me. I cannot draw anything, period. Like nothing. I can barely sign my name. So
this is why we type.
This is why we type, yes.
Yeah.
Right. So instead, I'm going to use generative AI, right? Now, what is generative AI? We've been hearing about it probably nonstop for the past like 6 months at least, right? Things like ChatGPT, right? Everybody has probably heard of that at this point. There was like that craze with, what was it called? Dolly, right?
Dolly. Midjourney.
Yeah.
Midjourney's the big one.
Yeah. So these are AI models that generate new things based off of input from us, basically users, right? So we've got, in the case of GPT models, that's like generating text about a topic that you tell it to. With something like Chat GPT, that has a full like chat interface to it too, so it can hold entire conversations. We're not going to get that advanced with what we've got deployed, but it'll still be cool. And then there's obviously my favorite term, stable diffusion, because it's just like, what does that mean? What is that? I don't know. I'm not smart enough for this. Every time I hear it, I'm like, I'm not smart enough for this. It just means text to image, I think. I could be totally wrong.
In like VC talk or give me money VCs talk.
Yeah, totally. But it takes your text and then it'll generate an image, which is probably the most key piece of our collectible card API, right?
Okay.
So I am using SageMaker, which if you've never used SageMaker like me, prior to this collectible cards venture that I'm out on now, it's very easy to get started with a part of SageMaker called Jump Starts. So Jump Starts, we come in here, has a bunch of models for ML noobs like me that I don't have to do anything to actually make this thing work, right? It's pre-trained. I don't have to have data. I don't have to go through training the model, open up Jupyter notebooks and pretending I know what I'm doing. No, it's got everything already ready for me. I can click one button. Yes, literally one button. I didn't believe it when I read it. And it actually was one button. That's it. And it will deploy out the pre-trained model and give me a REST API endpoint. It's incredible. It's one of the coolest things. It makes me feel like maybe I could do this stuff, maybe. Or at least trick people into thinking I know how to do this stuff. So I picked a stable diffusion model. And if you see, like, a lot of these are from Hugging Face, which is a company that we partner with that does a lot of model storage. I think they do a lot of AI and ML stuff that I don't fully understand. So just check out their webpage because they'll probably describe what they do a lot better than I can even attempt.
Also,
but all the
awesome
models,
name.
Yeah,
Such
right?
a great name.
All the models generally have like some sort of description, and they tell you like, for this input text, you're going to get a picture of something like this for astronaut on a horse. I don't know if you can even read that. That's pretty. Anyway,
Nice.
So I did this already. I go to my deployments. I go to my endpoints. I've got these endpoints already, right?
So we deployed these last episode, right?
Correct.
I mean, obviously you probably updated them, but we went through how to deploy them there.
Yeah, totally updated them. Last modified.
Service 28 days.
Definitely, Steve. I absolutely,
I just assumed you would tear everything down and start again for the next show, but obviously not.
Yeah, got time to do that, obviously. A lot of these also come with included, let me see if I have one open. Yeah, look, they come with included Jupyter notebooks, and they'll tell you how to run stuff. So I ran into an issue here. All right. I was writing JavaScript / TypeScript code, right? One of these models returns a NumPy array with the pixels of the image. Okay. As Anna knows, NumPy, that doesn't really exist in the JavaScript world. I'm sure there are libraries.
Python.
There.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a really well-known Python library.
Yeah. So instead of like going out and searching, like, how do I do this? How do I do this in JavaScript? Making life harder on me, which I'm sure there's a way. Like, don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'm positive there's a way. Instead, I thought, well, I'm building out an API. Why don't I just have two endpoints, right? One endpoint can be written in JavaScript, and one endpoint can be written in Python. Why not? They're both containerized applications, right? So
makes sense.
That's what I did. Let's take a look. All right. So as you can see, I still have that CC API, right?
Yeah.
So as I've made these changes, I would rename this as card dash description dash API, because this is our COA, right? Our COA API. And I've got a route here that's handling card description. Pardon. Sorry. Okay. So I put together a post route where you can send up a prompt, and that will utilize a library written by us at AWS for invoking SageMaker endpoints, which I didn't know existed before doing this.
I didn't know that existed either. Okay.
Yeah, same.
Super easy. Don't have to handle the authentication. All the authentication happens through AWS roles. You basically, and I'll point this out in the updated CDK, you just give your, in this case, containerized application running in ECS, you give that service a role that is allowed to invoke this SageMaker endpoint. And then you just use this library. That's it.
Nice.
So I get a response back, and then I send that back as a message, right? That's it.
Awesome.
Now, the card image API is a little different, remember, because it's sending back those pixels. All right. So same idea, though. Getting dry throat. I've got a prompt. I am doing a route for card image instead of description. Now, same here.
He's getting overcome with the excitement. He's got a Python and a TypeScript system.
Thank you for vamping, Steve. All right, so we've got this invoke endpoint. It's the same library, except now it's in Python, so it's Boto, which is the AWS Python SDK. But same invoke endpoint method that we saw in JavaScript. I'm setting up the same type of thing, the prompt. But now I'm parsing the response back to get generated images. Okay? And this is where I have to use some Python libraries to get those pixels and save them as a image.
Cool.
Does all this make sense? Maybe.
Awesome.
All right. So then I'm taking that saved image, that temporary image, uploading it to S3, upload file, generating a pre-signed URL so that I can view it.
Cool.
All that makes sense?
Yeah. So it's the URL that is being returned from the Python part of it.
That's right. That's right. So, cool. And in Python, I'm using a framework very popular called Flask.
Yeah.
With Flask in particular, just something interesting to note, it's not a server that can run on its own like Koa, for example, or Express. It needs a server in front of it. So it's using Gunicorn, which is just another very standard Python thing.
Where do they come up with these names?
Right?
I love it. You build the project, you get to name it, Steve.
Yeah, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. The CDK stuff is going to be very different, by the way. I had to eject from that higher order function because now I have two services running under the same application load balancer, which that higher order construct doesn't work that way.
Okay.
So I now have to create the application load balancer myself.
Yeah.
Which
so this is what rolling your own looks like. Definitely a bit more difficult.
As you can see, a lot more lines of code. So here's the actual like listener. I'll show you specifically. I've got targets here. Card description, right? So if the path pattern matches card description, it knows to send it to the card description service.
Okay.
Same for card image, just with the card image service. So same ALB with two different divergent paths. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. I got two different.
And this is all, did you get this from like the AWS documentation or find some examples online? Like, how did you know how to write this?
Yeah, great question. I scoured the internet basically and just like found random GitHub repos from people and pieced things together myself.
Yeah.
So
hey, whatever works.
Yeah, whatever works. I mean, that is how most people do
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure as code from code.
But now you can use this yourself.
Yeah.
Because I will be putting it in our Code Corner project repo. So come star this. Shameless plug here. Come star this because it's useful. There'll be useful things in here. Anyway, so I know we're at time. I think we can go over a little bit, but shall we see it working?
Yes, please.
That's like the more important.
You know I'm going to say yes, please, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So okay. AWS on air show. We
need some astronauts.
Yeah.
With some well, that's going to be the most important question, and we can ask chat. Maybe chat will have some ideas. What images should we generate?
Yeah, clean, please.
Yes.
Here's my load balancer, by the way. You can see we go to the listener, and it'll show these different divergent paths under the rules, right?
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Card image, and these actually like are aligned with, as you can see, how it works in ECS is they allocate. There's only one service running with one task in ECS, and it automatically allocates the IP addresses and stuff for you, so you don't have to worry about that. So yeah, I've got the endpoint already loaded up, and I started out obviously with our astronaut on a horse example. So I guess we can start with that.
Yeah.
So I just post that, and we should get S3 URL back here in just a minute. It takes a while, but it's surprisingly fast for what it's doing, to be honest.
Oh, Brian.
We're getting some prompts.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
I like it.
Because this is generative AI, I'm going to do this off screen first.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get.
Oh,
that's the fun part.
This is a great one. One. Look at that.
Whoa.
Oh, yes, that's good.
That's very
cool.
good.
Yeah.
I love the yellow.
Yeah. I would use that as a background.
Okay.
Neat.
So now we've got Gaucho Cat.
With a
mate.
I don't even know what some of those words are.
Like, I'm guessing like the T, like mate tea, if I had to guess.
Gaucho Cat with a, I don't have a international keyboard. we're gonna rely on the
probably
model.
Get it.
Yeah, I hope the model.
So we're gonna get a cat with a friend now, right?
Yeah, is it a British
with
model?
a mate?
With a mate.
It has been listening to Steve, so all right, same story. I'm previewing it.
So that ginormous link, that's just to your S3 bucket, right?
Yeah, that's a pre-signed URL.
Yeah.
Because I didn't make any of them public. I have no idea what this is.
Oh my goodness. Well, you certainly got a friend.
This is a thing of nightmares.
I mean, there's a cat-like form in the front.
Yeah. This would make a great pod. I'm just saying.
Yes.
Actually, Brian did say what it is. Argentinian tea drink from a gourd. Gourd? Gourd.
Practice your American accent, Steve.
I know. Gourd.
And bear. You're really good at bear.
Bear. Yeah, there's a bear in the woods. Mm-hmm.
Bear. Okay.
Any other suggestions in the chat?
Oh, or from you or Steve too.
Ooh. Dropped on the spot there, weren't we?
I know. Yeah, no blank. Let's see. Ballerina on the moon.
Ooh.
Hopefully I spelled ballerina right. Haven't been using my English degree, Anna.
Yeah. Feel you there.
I think
I'm
we
pretty
should.
left out. I don't have an English degree, and I'm English, so
Yeah. Okay. All right. Here we go. Preview. Oh, wow. Not really. It's kind of confusing perspective here, actually. So, looks like on the moon there, but then the moon is also in the background.
I mean, I didn't say our moon, so that could be a planet.
True. The first thing that struck me was we're missing a leg, but anyway.
Oh, well, that's true.
I mean, you did not specify how many legs.
You did not say two-legged ballerina, so
yeah,
okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah, yes.
The face is a little concerning.
I wouldn't want this as the astronaut we generated earlier on. So
I would not want this as a pog, if I'm being honest. I don't know. We keep it, Anna. What do you think? Reject?
Yeah, it's a little eject.
Okay. The second leg is the moon. Now that. Now we're talking. Okay. Yeah. So if you'll notice, there's still a lot of work to be done here. Number one, I can't save any of these. I can't save the description. We didn't even look at the description. We're kind of out of time anyway, but
yeah.
I can't save these anywhere. I don't have a user. There's none of that stuff. So
there's no user interface. It's all CLI right now.
Wait, you don't consider the CLI just to be the user?
How strange that you spotted that, Anna.
Yeah, we need a front end engineer here. Maybe.
Yeah. Oh man, next episode.
Just saying. So the other thing I wanted to talk about too are the trade-offs here of now I've got two different languages in the same project. I've got two different API frameworks, Flask and Koa, right? Are these benefits? Are these detractors? What do you all think? And how do you make these types of architectural choices? It saved me a ton of time because I could use the appropriate libraries for the response I was getting from the image API, for example. But I'll be honest with you, I don't have a good reason of why I would keep the TypeScript one. I would maybe just say, let's convert them both to Python.
I think Mike is a little biased there.
There you go, Mike.
Yeah. But fair enough.
Agrees.
Fair enough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, Mike has been on Step Up Your Game Day, and he touted the joys of Python too. So he's definitely biased for sure. But yes, I'll tell you one of the reasons why I use TypeScript and Python is because this is an illustrative show, right? We're here to teach you about multiple programming languages. But there are real cases where you would have multiple languages for multiple services.
There are, right?
Do we want to talk about that a little bit? I'm going to take my screen.
I mean, you might, just the fact that you're using CDK, you maybe the rest of your application is in Python, but CDK might be in TypeScript because there's a ton of examples out there specifically in TypeScript for CDK. So even if none of your actual business logic is in Python or is in TypeScript, you may still need it for your infrastructure.
Yeah.
And Mike is telling me that Python CDK is out there.
Yes, it exists, but
yeah, I was with you. Yes, it exists, but
most of the examples are in TypeScript for sure.
Yeah.
I was surprised, Anna, too. You didn't lead with let's tear this whole thing down and make it completely 100% Lambda.
Well, that's a given. That's a given.
Of course, for you.
But I mean, there are some restrictions on that because, like you saw, it takes a little bit to get that response back.
Yeah.
Lambda is generally for quick, short-lived use cases. I mean, it's gone way better on that front. You can have a longer running Lambda, but for some of these models, it's just not the best tool for the job.
And Mike is going to back me up here too, I'm sure, because I used ECS, which Mike works a lot on Copilot. So all around, I'm just making Mike happy and you unhappy here, Anna.
Are you taking payments?
From Mike? No. He hasn't offered.
Have you built your own payment processor?
I put my Cash App up, but he just won't send me anything. I sent him my Venmo too. Nothing. I keep like sending him payment requests on Venmo. No. Yeah. So a lot of choices too. That was another thing I wanted to talk about when getting the inferences from the models, especially if it starts taking like you can set things like return 6 images, instead of just the one, right? I don't know what that impact has on the actual inference time or return time from the endpoint. If that starts to get unmanageable from like a REST API's perspective, we're going to have to put something in there like a queue, right? Maybe something like SQS to offload and make these. And then, maybe instead of sending back the S3 URL, you send back like some sort of webhook type URL where, or if you're using something like WebSockets, right, then you don't have to send back something like a webhook URL. You can just update when the thing is done and send. But you're going to have some sort of asynchronous architecture probably at some point for something like this, which is something that, Steve, you and I talked about too when we were talking through the backmasking.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, that's right.
All right.
Yeah, we deliberately limited that at that point, right? To like, was it 3,000 characters or something? There was a length limit that we deliberately imposed so that we didn't, have that issue.
Yes.
Which again is another architectural trade-off, right?
That's right. That's right. And these things, are things that are not static. They don't, forever, you'll have that 3,000 character limit, for example. You can implement these changes as your product evolves, right? As you get more requests for these types of things, as you get more users, as it makes sense, right, to evolve your product.
And as the technology changes and gets faster, better.
That's right. So what'd y'all think? What'd y'all think about my collectible card, at least starting point?
I like it. I like how it's developing.
Yeah, it could use a UI.
You know what? Just for you, Anna, I'm gonna make an Angular UI.
No.
Yeah, just for you, I'll start crafting up an Angular UI. Make you real happy, right?
I take it back.
That hot new framework Angular that Anna can't get enough of.
Yeah, my favorite.
Mike's got a great point too with serverless.
Yes, he does.
This, Anna.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's all we've got time for.
We are at the end of our show, if not over the end of our show, right?
We are. We are.
We keep filling this show up every time. It's great.
I know, it's amazing. Yeah. And that beginning segment always keeps getting longer too, because we get more and more questions, more people watching.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite parts of the entire show, is hearing about everybody's journey, hearing their questions. So if you're joining us now, you've missed the show, unfortunately, but
you can watch it on demand.
Yeah, you'll be able to watch it on demand immediately after this broadcast ends. If you're new to AWS On Air in general, we have a bunch of shows. You want to list those for me, Steve? Because I'm starting to lose my voice.
Yeah, so we have, obviously, there's a regular AWS On Air show every Friday at midday Pacific. So we'll be on again tomorrow. So check back then. But we also have the specialist show. So we have the startup show with Gillian.
Yes.
We have the, is it called Under the Hood with Art?
Correct. That's all about compute.
There's Kyle's lockdown show about security. Yeah. I'm sure I'm missing somebody.
Maybe just me, Steve. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You have this thing called a game day. That's right. That caused me so much stress in Paris. Yes. So AM's Step Up Your Game Day show as well. So
he got it. The title. Anna, you're going to have to come play Step Up Your Game Day, by the way.
Sure. As long as there's no Angular.
Make sure that you wrap exceptions around any data you try and parse that AM sends you, because math on content length is a little tricky. So
maybe it was on purpose. Who knows?
Maybe it was on purpose.
Nobody
knows.
We
have those shows. They all run on different schedules. Some are weekly, some are bi-weekly. I'm trying to remember what the calendar is. Twitch.tv/AWS. There's a calendar on there, I believe. that has all the
Yes.
shows on. Yeah, so
It
if you
is.
check in there, you'll see all the upcoming shows.
Mike, Containers from the Couch is on twitch.tv/AWS.
Yeah.
Another one of our Twitch channels. Tomorrow, specifically with the AWS On Air show, you'll want to watch, especially if you were watching this show for generative AI, because they're covering all of the new generative AI stuff that launched this week.
Yep.
So be sure to watch tomorrow, 12 p.m. Pacific. And then we also cover special events too. So Steve and I were just out at the Paris Summit where I tortured Steve with a custom game day built just for him. I built it just for him on an airplane, Anna.
Yes.
And it was to teach him French. Okay.
Oh, how did that go?
That did not go well.
Not well.
I attempted to automate it, which kind of went well if I'd been given the correct JSON.
But that was the problem. It was not meant to be automated. It was meant to teach him French. If it's automated, he's not learning. So he was punished for trying to automate it.
Mm-hmm.
Which
I tried to game the system by automating it, so I got more and more points every time I actually correctly translated a phrase. So by using a Lambda function to do all that work for me, the points are racking up, and until there was an error in the content length.
That's right. Mike is jealous because I didn't build a game day for him specifically. We played a game day, but it wasn't. It was just. I'll have to build one for you, Mike. Maybe we can build one together. Anyway, so yeah, we were just at the Paris Summit. We've got the London Summit coming up, Public Sector Summit, Reinforce coming up. So be sure to tune in for those special events as well. Anna, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me. I'm so honored to be your first guest.
First guest ever. All right. Yeah. Did you enjoy your time here? You have to answer publicly.
Yes. I had.
Well, that means you have to come back.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Go check out App Composer. One of, like I said, one of my favorite. I'm hitting at my favorite part a little harder because.
Add it to your favorites on the AWS console.
It's like playlist on Spotify or something.
Yeah.
Let me share my favorites from the AWS console. Anyway, all right. So next time we'll be back with. I guess Steve will have to put some stuff together. I'll give you a preview of a project that I'm thinking of for Project Corner, and this is relevant to Anna. I want to build an app for the LGL that I'm calling it, the Literary Giants League, where it's like a sports app, but for like literary figures, like how many, like who's got the highest word count, like
a bracket system, like March Literature Madness.
Yeah, but it's stats, like individual stats for each of the famous literary figures.
Cool.
So that could be interesting. What do you think? Thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you think, Anna? As a fellow English major. Okay.
I mean, I like it as a book nerd. I don't know if everybody else will, but
that will be much in the future because Steve's up next. I don't know what you've got planned, Steve. I don't know if you want to give a preview or not.
Well, hopefully we'll have progressed a little bit more with Anopoly. If you remember last time when I left it, I was getting close to codifying the game loop. At least I had the basic loop coded out.
Mike,
is there a joke there somewhere? But you know what I was actually thinking was taking your. I was thinking of actually taking your French phrase thing from the Paris Summit.
Yeah.
But then turning it into something I call the phraser.
Oh, they want me to build a real game day out of that. By the way, they want a real quest out of that.
Yeah, so. I was watching some Star Trek the other night. I don't remember what series, what episode. I don't know, but they mentioned something about a universal translator, and I thought it would be cool to have an app where I don't know such a thing exists today, but this is my own, right? Where I just put in a phrase, and it translates into a bunch of different languages, and potentially has a sound that I can play it back and hear that same phrase in the different languages.
I am
pretty cool.
I'm just
build a Babelfish.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, and a fellow hitchhiker there. Yes. Yes, so I might have a crack at that using the code that we used in Paris to actually put that together.
Can't help but being an inspiration to you, Steve.
You are such an inspiration every day.
A lot in life. Just being the thought leader, and you're my thought follower, Steve.
You're living rent free somewhere up here. Yes.
Only joking. All right, we gotta go for real. It's been fun hanging out with you all. We hope to see you on another episode of Code Corner in the future, or on another AWS Honor show. Anna, thank you. Steve, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and if you're interested in generative AI, definitely check out the AWS on Air show tomorrow lunchtime, midday Pacific. So
we'll see you next time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.